In early summer 2018, David Miller's Iowa cornfields looked as promising as ever. Generations of his family had worked this land, trusting in its rhythms and the stability of rural life. But that year, whispers of trade disputes and tariffs began to circulate, unsettling the usual optimism. At first, most farmers dismissed the talk as political noise, confident that global markets would absorb their crops as always. Then, news of escalating tariffs and Chinese retaliation hit, especially hard for soybean farmers. Suddenly, the crops in the fields faced an uncertain future, with China, the largest buyer, threatening to cut off purchases. The confidence that marked the start of the season gave way to anxiety. Farmers who had planned for a routine harvest now faced the prospect of selling at a loss, or not at all. The machinery of global trade, once reliable, seemed to be grinding to a halt. For many, it felt like the rules had changed overnight, leaving their livelihoods hanging in the balance. Soybeans were the backbone of Midwest agriculture, with China as their biggest customer. In 2018, U.S. tariffs triggered swift Chinese retaliation. U.S. soybean exports to China collapsed by 94%. Silos overflowed as crops lost their main market, and prices plummeted. China quickly turned to Brazil and Argentina, forging new trade ties and leaving American farmers behind. This wasn't a temporary setback. It was a seismic shift in global trade. Even by 2025, U.S. market share in China never fully recovered. Trust was broken, and China diversified its suppliers. American farmers learned that once lost, international markets are nearly impossible to win back. The tariffs left a deep, lasting wound on U.S. agriculture. Ongoing trade tensions and new tariffs in 2025 only deepened the uncertainty. The pain spread far beyond soybeans. Corn, wheat, pork, dairy, and fruit producers all faced retaliatory tariffs from key markets like Mexico and Canada. Export channels narrowed and input costs soared as tariffs made equipment and supplies more expensive. Farmers were squeezed, falling prices for their goods, rising costs to produce them. Profit margins vanished, pushing many to the brink. Loans became harder to secure, and the dream of passing farms to the next generation faded. The ripple effect hit rural communities. Local businesses suffered, and support systems like cooperatives struggled. Hog and dairy producers faced steep losses as export opportunities dried up. The promise that tariffs would help rang hollow in the heartland. Instead, the crisis deepened, threatening the entire rural economy. Economic fallout quickly became personal. Farm loan delinquencies rose and foreclosures returned, echoing the farm crisis of the 1980s. Multi-generational farms were lost, shattering family legacies. Rural cooperatives collapsed under financial strain, making it harder for farmers to access essential supplies. The fabric of rural life began to unravel. Mental health crises surged, with rising farmer suicide rates reported across the Farm Belt. The stress, isolation, and sense of betrayal were overwhelming. Many farmers felt abandoned by policies that had once promised prosperity. The human cost of the trade wars was measured in heartbreak and loss. The government responded with billions in aid, but payments were a poor substitute for lost markets. Farmers wanted to sell their crops, not rely on subsidies. The aid couldn't restore broken trade relationships or rebuild trust. Comparisons to the 1980s farm crisis were frequent, but this time the damage was global and structural. International buyers, burned once, diversified away from U.S. suppliers. The uncertainty stifled investment and clouded the future for rural communities. As of mid-2025, new tariffs and ongoing disputes kept recovery out of reach. Rebuilding will require stable, predictable trade policies, something farmers are still waiting for.